Hello, my name is Pip Brennan and I'm the Executive Director of the Health Consumers Council. This is a short presentation on the consumer perspective in palliative care prepared for the Palliative Care Summit held in August 2019. So the Health Consumers Council would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we're meeting today, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and pay respects to all elders past, present and future. We would like to extend our respect to all other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures. Also, the Health Consumers Council believes it's really important to always acknowledge the traditional owners and to recognise the disparity in health outcomes. And in this case, with this slide, I wanted to highlight that bereavements for Aboriginal people occur at a rate that is unthinkable to most other Australians, and really acknowledge the impact of this on Aboriginal communities and the absolute importance that we continue the journey of creating culturally competent and culturally inclusive palliative care models. So the Health Consumers Council put together a very short survey, which we weren't funded to do this, so it hasn't gone as wide and far as it may have otherwise. However, it was really a qualitative survey where we were looking for feedback, sort of a richer, more descriptive feedback. And so whilst there's 28 responses in this, I think there's some really interesting insights. This first one, we themed the free text responses, and interestingly, care was the word that came up the most, which I think is really encouraging. So dying and end of life were around about the same amount, and then there's quality of life. I think it's something that we think is really important is how can we almost rebrand palliative care in the mind of the consumer. This really, really spoke to me. I think when you think of palliative care, we forget about paediatric palliative care. So I wanted to include this particular quote. And she wrote, "Before my son was in palliative care, it meant death and dying. After understanding it and seeing the first-hand difference it made to my son's life, he had a life-limiting rare brain malformation called lissencephaly. We saw it as being about living and quality of life." And that is what we really do hope consumers over time get to understand, that it's quality of life care, and it's something that we really need to be accessing more and seeking more. I thought this one was also an interesting one, the end of life care when illness is no longer being treated to prolong life, but symptoms are managed to keep the patient comfortable. However, I think there needs to be a focus on this starting sooner rather than palliative care being thought of just as the final stages. And it's important here to remember that this is very much about the health system to offering this sooner. So it's a cultural change within the health system as well as an awareness raising amongst the community. Question 2 was a multiple choice question in regards to having an illness, what's important to you? And what's really interesting here is that being heard has scored as highly as being comfortable. I think again it's that really important thing of the importance of being respected and it being a real shared decision and partnership is so important to consumers. Interestingly too, being close to home has scored higher than being home. We also asked a free text comment for that question, and there was a range of different free text responses that we've themed here into informed choice, the care that's received, the inclusion of family and loved ones, and access to voluntary assisted dying. And so, some of the comments reflected was, I would wish to be treated only if the treatments are going to aid in keeping me pain-free. So the importance of, cessation of heroic treatments. The last weeks or days should be celebrated, and family and comfort, support and care are so very important for all. So it's that whole experience for the family. Support for my loved ones is also something that is seen as really important. I prefer to choose to die. So again, there were a couple of comments that really, from the consumer perspective, I know that this is contentious, but from the consumer perspective, the choice to die is part of that package for them. The third question was a free text one. As a consumer or carer, do you have any experiences of palliative care that you'd like to share? So clearly with a survey like this, largely people were trying to debrief experiences which perhaps hadn't gone as well as you would like. And so I fully acknowledge that this is a small sample, but again, there's some really interesting reflections. This one here talks about how they experienced this. Watching a loved one in pain, waiting all day for another nurse to attend who you have never met and did not examine the patient properly. There seems to be no other help in Perth. You bring a dying, in pain family member to your GP who says, don't come here anymore, you're under silver chain. So for that particular consumer, they were feeling that sense of there not being a choice and they're not actually getting the care that their loved one needed. This one here, they let the nurses at the nursing home scribble notes all over Dad's end-of-life care directive, making it not legal. We were put on the spot to decide Dad's end-of-life decisions at hospital because of this. The representatives from the hospital that came to see us initially were quite blunt, telling us awful scenarios re-hospitalisation for palliative care patients. None of what they told us happened. I think it's always important to remember that we write our policies, we write our, models of care, but this is not always what's experienced that by consumers. It's really important to constantly be able to reflect back to the system when this doesn't occur. This next one here, mum was taken to a palliative facility without family being notified, and service provider cancelling mum's level 4 package again without notifying family. Family finding out from mum's neighbour that she'd been taken to the facility. Then when mum's condition was able to be stabilised, family then contacted to pick her up as she was no longer eligible to stay at the facility. Family then had the job of trying to reinstate her package. When asked why they did what they did and did not contact family, we were told that mum can make her own decisions. I just don't understand how they can justify one as being heavily dosage on medication for their condition are fully competent in making sound decisions. When mum's condition was stabilised, I had mum on the phone to me begging me to get her out of the facility she was sent to. So again, there's that from the family perspective, as Kathy Euchre talks about, it really is important to see it as a whole team, that the consumer and their family are the whole package of care. And in this case, I think the family member makes a really important point that her loved one was not really in a position to be able to make informed choices at that point. However, it's that grey non-substitute decision-maker area, but again, the importance of that partnership. I'm just going to finish up now. Of course, earlier we talked about the Sustainable Health Review, and I've just picked out that Enduring Strategy 1, Recommendation 4, and the Priority and Implementation, which talks about consumer and carer voices embedded into health system governance structures and make consumer care, clinician partnerships and co-design projects a normal part of business. And I guess I want to ask the people sitting in the audience, are you going to live up to these commitments? So this, as mentioned, this survey only had 28 responses, but 16 of those people put their hand up to get more involved. And I guess I want to know, how are you going to include them in this next step? Thank you very much.